Dickens. Dickens was born in Portsmouth, on the southern coast of England, in 1812. He had an unhappy childhood. His father was imprisoned for debt, and at the age of 12 he was put to work in a factory. When the family finances improved and his father was released, he was sent to school in London. At 15 he found employment as an office boy at Lawyers and studied shorthand at night. By 1832 he had become a very successful shorthand reporter of parliamentary debates in the House of Commons and began to work as a reporter for a newspaper. His first story appeared in 1833, and in 1836, still a newspaper reporter, he had up the pen name Boz, publishing Sketches by Boz, a collection of articles and tales describing London's people and scenes, written for the periodical Monthly Magazine. He was immediately followed by the posthumous papers of the Pickwick Club, also known as the Pick Papers, which was published in installments and revealed Dickens' humoristic and satirical qualities. Dickens married Catherine Folger in April 1836, and during the same year he became editor of Bentley's Miscellany and published the second series of Sketches by Boz. After the success of the Pickwick Papers, Dickens started a full-time career as novelist, of producing work of increasing complexity and incredible variety, although he also continued his journalistic and literary activities. Oliver Twist was begun in 1836 and continued in monthly installments until April 1839. Nicholas Nickleby was published in 1839. Although he was a Republican, Dickens took strongly against the United States when he visited the country in 1842. In October of that year, his American Notes appeared, in which he advocated international copyright and the abolition of slavery. Martin Chuzzlewit, part of which was set in America, appeared in 1844, 1 year after the publication of A Christmas Carol, the first of Dickens' successful Christmas books. The protagonist of his autobiographical novel, Oliver Twist, David Copperfield, and Little Dorrit became the symbols of an exploited childhood, confronted with the bitter realities of slums and factories. Other works include Black House, Hard Times, and Great Expectations, which deal with the condition of the poor and the working class in general. By the time of his sudden death in Kent, in 1870s, Dickens had drawn a direct route to his public appearance in England, Scotland and Ireland. He had met princes and presidents, and he had amassed a fortune. He was buried in Westminster Abbey. Dickens shifted the social frontiers of the novel. The 18th century realistic upper middle class world was replaced by the one of the lower orders. He was the creator of characters and caricatures who live immortally in the English imagination. Mr. Pickwick, Mr. Gradgrind, Scrooge and many others. His aim was to arouse the reader's interest by exaggerating his characters' habits, as well as the language of the London middle and lower classes, like lodging house keepers, shopkeepers and tradesmen, whose social peculiarities, vanity and ambition he ridiculed freely, though without sarcasm. He was always on the side of the poor, the outcast and also the working class. Children are often the most important characters in Dickens' novels. A lot of instances of good, wise children as opposed to worthless parents and the other grown-up people, illustrating fiction the reverse of the natural order of things. Children become the moral teachers instead of the example instead of the imitators. Novelist's ability lay both in in making his readers love his children and putting them forward as model of the way people ought to behave to one another. This didactic stance was very effective since the result was the more educated, the wealthier classes acquired knowledge about their poorer neighbours, of whom they previously knew little or nothing. Dickens' task was never to get the most wronged and suffering to rebel, or even encourage discontent, but to make the ruling classes aware of the social problems without offending his middle-class readers. Dickens employed the most effective language and accomplished the most graphic and powerful description of life and characters ever attempted by any novelist. It is so with his careful choice of adjectives, repetition of words and structures, juxtaposition of images and ideas, hyperbolic and ironic remarks. He is considered as the greatest novelist in the English language. His novels were influenced by the Bible, fairy tales, fables, and nursery rhymes by the 18th century novelists and essayists, and by Gothic novels. His plots are well planned, even if at times they appear a bit artificial, sentimental. Certainly the condition of publication in monthly or weekly installments discouraged unified plotting and create pressure on Dickens to conform to the public taste. London was the setting of most his novels. He always seemed to have something new to say about it, and showed an intimate knowledge of it. He gradually developed a more radical social view, although he didn't become a revolutionary thinker. He was aware of the spiritual and material corruption of daily reality under the impact of industrialism. The result was an increasingly critical attitude towards his society. In fact, in his major works, Dickens succeeded in drawing popular attention to public abuses, habits and wrongs by mingling terrible descriptions of London misery and crime with the most amusing sketches of metropolitan life. Curiosities. Dickens had a photographic memory of people in the fancy's childhood, which he used in his writings. He was fascinated by hypnotism and up down to use it to cure his wife and children. He was an obsessive compulsive. It was reported that he used to rearrange his auto furniture and had to sleep with his head pointing north. A Christmas Carol, 1843, was published at around the same time as the use of Christmas trees and carols became widespread and the first Christmas cards appeared. In 1846, Dickens founded Urania Cottage, a home for all the redemption of fallen women, where thought domestic skills to be reintegrated into society. About 400 films and TV series based on the works of Dickens have been produced so far. Oliver Twist. Oliver Twist first appeared in installments in 1836 and was later published as a book. The novel fictionalizes the economic insecurity and humiliation Dickens experienced as a child. The name Twist, though it is given to the protagonist by accident, represents an outrageous reversal of fortune that he will experience. Oliver Twist is a poor boy of unknown parents. He was born in a workhouse in a small town near London in the early 19th century. His mother dies almost immediately after his birth and he is brought up in a workhouse in an inhuman way. The boy commits the unpardonable offense of asking for more food. When he is close to starving, so the parish official offers £5 to anyone willing to take Oliver and as an apprentice. In fact, he is later sold to an undertaker, but the cruelty and unhappiness he experiences with his new master make him run away to London. There, he falls into the hands of a gang of young pickpockets, trained by Fagin, who runs the school for would-be thieves. Unfortunately, Oliver is not a successful student. He's caught on his first attempt at theft. Mr. Brownlow, the victim, is stricken by the bad and unhealthy appearance of Oliver, and rather than charging him with theft, he takes him home and takes care of him. Oliver is eventually kidnapped by Fagin's gang and forced to commit burglary. During the job, he is shot and wounded. Oliver is adopted by Mr. Brownlow and at least receives kindness and affection. Investigations are made about who Oliver is, and it is discovered that he has noble origins. In the end, the gang of pickpockets and Oliver's half-brother, who paid the thief in order to ruin Oliver, and on their father's property for himself, are arrested. Dickens attacked the social evils of his time, such as poor houses, unjust codes, and the underworld. With the rise in the level of poverty, workhouses run by parishes were built all over England to give relief to the poor. However, the condition prevailing in the workhouses were appalling, and they did not provide any means for social or economic alliances. Furthermore, as Dickens pointed out, instead of alleviating the suffering of the poor, the officials who ran workhouses abused their rights as individuals and caused them further misery. The most important setting of the novel is London, which is depicted at three different social levels. First, the parochial world of the workhouse is revealed. The inhabitants of this world, belonging to the society's lower middle class, are calculating and insensible to the feelings of the poor. Second, the criminal world is described with pickpockets and murderers. Poverty drives them to crime, and the way they use to achieve their end is violence. They live in dirty, squalid slums with fear and generally die in a miserable death. Finally, the world of the Victorian middle class is presented. In this world live respectable people who show a regard for moral values and believe in the principle of human dignity. So, Oliver Twist was born in a workhouse, and his mother died immediately after his birth. He was taken by the attendants, who announced his arrival into the workhouse by sticking a badge and a ticket on him. He was then brought up as an orphan by the parish authorities. This extract reveals Dickens' awareness of the social problems linked to the life in a workhouse. A very famous extract of Oliver Twist is "Oliver wants some more." So, the distribution of the food described as a religious ceremony. The master is like a priest. There are four main antithetical images: children, adults, fatness, starvation, richness, poverty, middle class, poor, power of the master, subjection of the children. The description is very detailed because the author wants the reader to take the side of the children, to feel pity for them. In this extract we can find narration, dialogue and description. Narration has the function to highlight the different condition of the boys and of the adults, and dialogues are more lively than the description, therefore they create interest. Our time focuses on the difference between the rich and the poor, at Dickens' time, between factory owners and workers, who were forced to work long hours for low pay in dirty, loud and dangerous factories. As they lacked education and job skills, these workers had few options for improving their terrible living conditions. and working conditions. This novel uses its characters and stories to denounce the gap between the rich and the poor, and to criticize the materialism and narrow-mindedness of utilitarianism, which was the basic Victorian attitude to economics. At times suggests that 19th century England was turning human beings into machines by avoiding the development of their emotion and imagination. So our time is set in an imaginary industry town named Coketown. Coke is a kind of coal. Thomas Gradgrind, an educator who believes in facts and statistics, has founded a school where his theories are told, and he brings up his two children, Louisa and Tom, in the same way, repressing their imagination and feelings. He marries his daughter to Josiah Brownderby, which was a bad character, a rich banker of the city, 30 years older than she is. The girl consents since she wishes to have their brother, who is given a job in Bounderby's bank, but the marriage proves to be unhappy. Tom, who is lazy and selfish, robs his employer. At first he succeeds in throwing the suspicion on an honest workman, but is finally discovered and obliged to leave the country. In the end, Mr. Gradgrind understands the damage he has caused to his children and gives up his narrow-minded, materialistic philosophy. The fictional city of Coketown stands for a real industrial mill town in mid-19th century Victorian England. It is a sort of brick jungle. The machineries of the factories are like mad elephants, and their smoke looks like serpents. The place of artifacts and our leaves seems to be turned into some kind of magical but hellish land. All the buildings, which are covered with soot coming from the coal-burning factories outside. However, nothing seems to bother the mill owners. They seem to be proud of the polluted air of Coketown. To some, black residue that wraps up the town may symbolize productivity and industry. To others, it may just be depressing. So, the structure. Our Times is divided into 3 sections. All books, and each book is divided into separate chapters. Book 1, Sowing, shows the seeds planted by the Gradgrind Bounderby education. Louisa, Tom, and Stephen Blackpool. Book 2, Reaping, reveals the harvesting of these seeds. Louisa's unhappy marriage, Tom's selfishness and criminal ways, Stephen's rejection from Coketown. Book 3, Garnering, is linked to a dominant symbol, instability, which is no longer the solid ground upon which Mr. Gradgrind's system once stood. The philosophy of utilitarianism comes forth largely through the action of Mr. Gradgrind and his follower Bounderby, as the former educates the children of this family and his school through facts. The latter treats the workers in his factory as emotionless objects that are easily exploited for his own self-interest. Mr. Gradgrind believes that human nature can be measured, quantified, and governed entirely by reason. Indeed, his school tries to turn children into little machines that behave according to such rules. Dickens' primary aim in Our Times is to illustrate the dangers of the teaching method called object lesson, originally conceived as a method of observation arising from children's own experience, and suited to their particular stage of development, but distorted in its introduction during the schools. That form acquired more importance than subject matter, leading to lessons where humans were actually dehumanized. David Copperfield Considered by Charles Dickens as his favorite child, David Copperfield is a classic Bildungsroman, coming-of-age novel that follows the life of its narrator from a troubled infancy to his ultimate success as a renewed author. The novel is deeply autobiographical drawings on Dickens' own traumatic experiences with child labor and his father's imprisonment for debt. Born in Blunderstone, David initially has a happy life with his mother Clara and their servant Peggotty. This is shattered when Clara marries the cruel Mr. Marston, who sends David to work at a wine bottling factory in London after her death. David runs away to Dover to find his only living relative, his eccentric great-aunt, Betsy Truthwood, who adopts him. He completes his education in Canterbury while he meets Agnes Wickfield. As an adult, initially marries the childlike Dora Spenlow, but after her tragic death and a period of grieving abroad, he returns to England and to marry Agnes, his true emotional anchor. Key characters are David Copperfield, the protagonist whose journey focuses on taming his undisciplined heart. Wilkins Micawber, a perpetually in-debt but optimistic man based on Dickens' father, known for his belief that something will turn up. Harriet Heap, the humble and villainous clerk, whose false humility makes a greedy and manipulative nature. And James, David's charismatic but elitist school friend whose selfishness leads to the ruin of others, including little Emily. So, the core themes. Dickens explored how the powerful in Victorian society like Marston or the schoolmaster McCrackle exploit the vulnerable, particularly orphans and women. The novel contrasts David's noble pursuit of becoming a gentleman through hard work with Horace Heap's corrupt social climate. A central theme where David must learn to move past romantic infatuation, like his love for Dora, towards a more mature, stable affection.